The Seahawks. Number one, I'm not. Maybe it's one of those things where they've accomplished so much that they're kind of asleep beginning of the year and they know when to turn it on, kind of like the Spurs do in the NBA.
Right. True.
And they have that veteran leadership. The other thing is, I'm still not sure what to make of their record because they had these leads against the Panthers and against the Bengals, these undefeated teams in the fourth quarter. So they could easily be, say, 6-2. On the other hand, you take the Lions game and that the play that was called wrong there, the Cowboys game where they only beat the Cowboys by 1, they could easily also be 2-6.
Yeah.
So you figure they're probably about where they should be right now. It's just so hard to gauge just how good this team is right now. But the Cardinals, they better not be looking at the Seahawks record when they go in there. They better be with that mentality that this is a Super Bowl caliber team still, because they definitely can play at that level.
And the tough thing with the Seahawks, they don't lose very often at CenturyLink Field. I mean, that's a great home field advantage. It's one of the loudest stadiums, if not the loudest stadium in the entire league, and they've got that fan support, the 12th man up there, and it's not an easy place to win football.
Like I said, I mean, there's a great chance they win these next 2 games at home, and then we're looking at 6. I mean, depending on what the Cards do against the Bengals, I mean, we're looking at 2 6-4 teams, and all of a sudden Seattle's slow start doesn't mean anything.
It was a bizarre game a couple of years ago. One of the Seahawks' most recent losses at home was to the Cardinals 2 years ago. And it was a bizarre game because Palmer threw, 4 interceptions, and the Cardinals still found a way to win that game with defense. They actually outplayed the Seahawks on defense. They might, one of the things is maybe the Cardinals defense gets a little chip on their shoulder this week, hearing about how good Seattle is, and Tyrann Mathieu and Rashad, the secondary in particular, Calais Campbell, they just come out and they're just ready to go.
Also the other broken record they've been hearing for too long now is how easy that first half of the schedule was.
Which frankly, it has been.
It has been, but I guarantee it's probably going to light a bit of a fire.
It's very similar to last year's 9-1 start. It was like everything, the cards just lined up for Arizona last year. It was just the games just fell in the right place, the right order. And before you knew it, they were 9-1. And then, of course, Carson Palmer gets hurt. Yeah. But it was just like, my goodness, this couldn't have been a better schedule for them. And that's sort of the way this first half of the season lined up again. It was like, man, this is unbelievable. They could very easily be 8-0 right now.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you could probably make the argument that they absolutely should.
Oh, yeah.
And then you head into the second half of the season a perfect 8-0. Oh, it's such a better position to be in. Now you got to bring it.
On the other hand, though, they go into the bye week 8-0. It tends to seep in their heads, wow, we're the greatest team ever, right?
No, that's true.
And maybe they go into Seattle a little flat. So you never know. It could work either way.
Keeps you humble.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to talk some fantasy football. Can we do that?
Let's do it.
Russ Bliss is joining us again, of course, the fantasy football expert. Russ, thanks for being on here with us. We certainly appreciate you joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you guys doing?
We are doing good and anxious to talk to you, Russ, because we had a Cardinals bye week, and we got to find out what's going on across the fantasy football world this week.
Well, as far as what happened this past weekend, the New England Patriots are a big loser as far as for fantasy purposes. Dion Lewis had been one of the great stories of 2015, and he's now diagnosed with a torn ACL. This is his second major injury to that leg in the last couple of seasons, so he's going to miss the rest of this year. And, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers, add insult to injury by losing Ben Roethlisberger this past week for another couple of weeks. He suffers a foot sprain. They're already missing Le'Veon Bell, who's gone for the rest of the year. Looks like Landry Jones the next couple of weeks for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Speaking of those Pittsburgh Steelers, Le'Veon Bell out. DeAngelo Williams, huge week. This is the one. If he's available in your league, you got to grab him, right?
Yeah, I missed on him.
Oh, yeah. If DeAngelo Williams is available in anyone's league, he definitely needs to be owned. Despite the fact that he didn't start all those games that Le'Veon Bell was in, DeAngelo Williams is still fantasy's 12th highest scoring running back on the season. He's averaging 10 points per game, and when you look at the 3 starts that he's actually made, he's been piling up points for fantasy. So Le'Veon Bell's definitely DeAngelo Williams, definitely a guy that you want to have on your fantasy roster.
Hey, Russ, let me ask you just this random question because he's a rookie. Marcus Mariota, has he been a surprise this year or I guess not so much?
Marcus Mariota has actually been a big surprise in my opinion. You take a look at him so far on the season, he's got 1,610 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. That's what's really key in my opinion with Mariota, is that he has not been turning the ball over. And you take a look, he's got multiple touchdown games in 4 of the 6 games that he's played so far this season. I think that Marcus Mariota has shown flashes of great things to come in the future. And now that they don't have Ken Wisenhunt, we saw this past week that they let him go out there. Mike Mularkey really let the reins off of him, and he completed 71.8% of his passes, threw for 371 yards, had 4 touchdowns, and he did all that while missing his top wide receiver in Kendall Wright. Marcus Mariota is a guy to actually believe in fantasy.
Hey, Russ, let me ask you about, we were just talking about Andre Ellington, and he seems like he's kind of dropped off the face of the earth these last several weeks. Do you think he's going to come into play at all the second half of the year? Is he an interesting buy low candidate?
I don't think so. I think that Andre Ellington and David Johnson both are going to pretty much split all the carries behind Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson's going to be the workhorse running back for the Cardinals, but he obviously doesn't play that often in passing situations because he doesn't have an awful lot of receptions so far on the season. He's only got 5 receptions on 8 targets. So they don't target him in the passing game. It's going to be Johnson and Ellington, and more between those two, they're more like bye-week fillers or injury replacement filler plays in fantasy football because their floor is very low, meaning that they could score very few fantasy points, but they at least have some upside with their receptions in turning things over and making things happen in the passing game. So neither are guys that I'd want to start even as a running back 3, but they're guys that you can have on your bench and plug in as needed.
Yeah, if you're starting David Johnson or Andre Ellington, you're in rough shape.
You're in trouble, yeah.
But you talked about Marcus Mariota. Let's talk about the other rookie quarterback, Jameis Winston. I will say, I've got Carson Palmer my starting quarterback. It's his bye week. Picked up Jameis Winston. Did great for me, 18, 19 points. He's available in a lot of leagues. Is that a guy maybe someone should throw on their roster?
He's someone that could be a serviceable backup quarterback. You look at his games, and he's got one game. This past week is the only one in which he hasn't thrown a touchdown in. But he's only had 3 games where he's thrown for 2 touchdowns or more. He's only had 2 games where he's thrown for over 250 passing yards. He has yet to eclipse 300 passing yards. But one of the good things for him is that Mike Evans is back, and Mike Evans looks healthy. They should be getting back the tight end, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, here real soon. And hopefully Vincent Jackson can come back from that knee injury in the next couple of weeks. So as we head into towards the fantasy playoffs, which start up in a lot of leagues in weeks 13 or 14, Jameis Winston's the guy that you might want to have on your bench as a backup fantasy quarterback in case something happens.
All right, Russ, the Cardinals go to Seattle, Sunday night game, nationally televised. Marshawn Lynch, how do we quantify him so far this year? Because he's been up and down. He hasn't been beast mode every game. What do the Cardinals have to do to stop him, or is he going to be a factor in this game?
Oh, he'll probably be a factor in that game. You know, Seattle's always tough when they're playing at home. The Cardinals have a very good run defense, though, so far this year, especially when you look at it in terms of fantasy. They've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns so far in the season, only 4 touchdowns total to running backs overall as the position goes, and they give up an average of 15.2 fantasy points per game to the running back position overall. You're going to see a lot of Marshawn Lynch in this game because I think that the Seattle Seahawks still really don't know whether or not Russell Wilson can be a guy that can air it out 30 to 40 times a game. So look for a lot of Marshawn Lynch. And the Cardinals, all they have to do to stop Marshawn Lynch is tackle. Don't try to just hit him because you'll bounce off of him. You got to wrap up Marshawn Lynch. Slow him down. At the very least, slow him down enough to the point where someone else can come in and put the hit and help bring him down, because one guy normally does not bring down Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, and Russ, we were talking just a moment ago about the Seahawks total passing. They're 20th in the NFL right now. Like you said, they're not really sure if Russell Wilson's a guy that can air it out consistently with success. He has one of the greatest weapons at tight end, Jimmy Graham. Of course, he tore it up in New Orleans. What's the deal with Jimmy Graham? He seems pretty inconsistent this year.
I think the problem with Jimmy Graham is that the offense is not tailor-made to be tight end friendly there in Seattle. They really need to rethink their entire offensive philosophy if they want to go ahead and get Jimmy Graham more oriented into that offense. He's only got 2 touchdowns. He's only got 450 yards. You know, if you take a look at it as far as yardage goes, he's in line to have decent tight end numbers, 900 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. But he has been getting more involved in recent weeks. So I think that Jimmy Graham is going to get a little bit higher production coming up here in the second half of the season, but he's still not going to be the same tight end he was when Drew Brees was throwing the football 40 times a game and throwing for nearly 5,000 yards every season the last few seasons. That's what's really hindering Jimmy Graham, in my opinion.
Russ, who do you like most, or maybe who do you dislike the least among the Cardinals wide receivers going into Seattle? You got Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, John Brown are all capable of scoring in any given game. Who do you like most going into that game?
Actually, I like Larry Fitzgerald. Even though Larry Fitzgerald, is the elder statesman at the wide receiver position, and John Brown, we're hoping that the hamstring issues are behind him now, but we don't know that for sure, and we don't know whether or not, with him coming back after just having 2 weeks of rest, whether that's enough time for him to get fully over the injury. One of the things that always bothers me with hamstring injuries is that if you bring a guy back before that hamstring is totally healed up, you have a much higher risk of re-aggravating the injury. So I'd say that probably the Cardinals wide receiver that I like the least is John Brown because of that issue right there. But at the same time, he's also very explosive. He can take the top off. If he is able to, if the hamstring is totally healed, with Larry and Michael Floyd operating more of the intermediate route, John Brown could actually blow by some of this coverage and put up a big game. I like all the Cardinals wide receivers, despite the fact that the Seattle Seahawks are very good against opposing wide receivers. They are the #1 fantasy defense against wide receivers. They've only allowed 797 passing yards in 8 games to wide receivers and only 1 touchdown to a wide receiver so far. The Cardinals have got their work cut out for them. We're going to find out whether or not we're ready for the changing of the guard in the NFC West this week when the Cardinals take on the Seattle Seahawks. Because if Carson Palmer can go in there, put up good numbers, get the wide receivers involved, and the Cardinals come out of there with a victory, I think that pretty much we've seen the changing of the guard.
So that's the key right now, because you just mentioned that secondary of the Seahawks. Are they the Legion of Boom right now? Because it seemed like early on they really weren't, but maybe they are.
Yeah, now they are. With Cam Chancellor back, they're definitely back to being the Legion of Boom. That secondary is as good a secondary as there is in the NFL. They cover wide receivers very well. It's because they're all great physical size. They match up against today's prototypical wide receivers. In the NFL now, they want big wide receivers that can run fast and outleap opponents. Well, guess what? The Seattle Seahawks figured out early on that the best way to defend against that is to get big cornerbacks and big defensive backs that can run fast and have great leaping ability and good coverage skills, and that's exactly what they have there. It's going to be a chess match.
What do you think they put Sherman on?
I'm probably going to say that they're going to put Sherman on Larry Fitzgerald because they're going to dare the Cardinals to try and beat them with Michael Floyd and John Brown and see whether or not John Brown can actually run with that hamstring. But even with that, I still like Larry Fitzgerald. Look at the season he's having so far this year. NFL in fantasy. 55 receptions, 706 yards, 7 touchdowns so far on the season. Larry is the #5 scoring fantasy wide receiver. Larry Fitzgerald's the guy that, you don't sit. You just go ahead and play him regardless of the matchups and hope that he has 1 or 2 big catches that help propel you.
Hey, Russ, let me stay in the NFC West and talk about Blaine Gabbert for the 49ers versus Colin Kaepernick.
Probably available in a lot of leagues.
Well, Blaine Gabbert's someone that I'm leaving on the free agent wire just because of a declining Atlanta team that was, a fluke when it was undefeated and has been proven out over the last couple of games. That Blaine Gabbert's not someone that I'm going to buy into. As it is, Tom Sula refused to even name Blaine Gabbert his starting quarterback for this upcoming week for the 49ers. So I think that we're going to have to wait and see on that. I don't have much hope for the 49ers. Look at Sean Drawn, had to lead them with rushing this past weekend because of the injuries to Carlos Hyde, Reggie Bush, Mike Davis. Racked up 56 yards on 16 carries. That's not really scaring anybody too much. And they still don't have I don't think that there's a great weapon there for any quarterback to really use. Or actually, I like Torrey Smith as a deep threat, but you got to have a quarterback that can get him the ball down the field for it to be effective. And they don't have that right now. I'm not buying into Gabbert at all.
Hey, Russ, thank you so much for taking some time with us today. We really appreciate your insight. Very helpful.
Good luck to you, fantasy-wise.
Thank you, Russ.